Isn't it 10:30? It's 10:30. Let's start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rosette Komjisha, the National Content Capacity Building Lead at Total E&P Uganda. And on behalf of the organizers of this webinar, I welcome you to this session. As a few guidelines to enable us successfully have this webinar, please mute your microphone on the Zoom platform and disable your video. Click on those icons. Please do not share your screen. And for the Q&A session, we will be receiving questions in the chat. Make sure you type your name, your company, to whom you're addressing the question, and send it to everyone so that we can capture it. These questions shall be answered during the Q&A session, and please feel free while each speaker or panelist is talking to capture these questions so that we answer them as they come in. A kind note is that this webinar is being recorded for content preservation purposes for future use. In the oil and gas industry, safety is very important, and we always start our meetings or engagements with a safety moment. Today's safety moment is in relation to water. We take water to maintain our life. We know there's a saying that water is life, but do we know that water can actually go bad? And this depends on how we handle it. So these 7 tips will enable you make sure that you handle your water well, your drinking water, and make sure that you do not contaminate it for your health and safety. First of all, do not handle the mouth or the rim of the container that you're drinking your water from. Please use glass, ceramic, or metal containers. Do not expose any water to open air because this can introduce germs. Do not drink water from plastic bottles which have been left open for long periods. This already is an element of contamination. Please discard any leftover water that has been sitting for more than 2 days. Discard any expired bottled water. So whenever we use bottled water, we need to check that the expiry date is still valid. And if it's expired, do not drink it. Please discard it and get a fresh one. And finally, never reuse plastic bottles for drinking water. These are single-use bottles and they need to be discarded appropriately in plastic disposal areas. Our moderator today is a well-known lady in the oil and gas sector, as well as the tax sector. Her name is Ms. Pamela Natamba. She's a tax partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and she's also a council member of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. She has over 15 years experience in tax consulting and advisory services, both in Uganda and in the international market. She's worked for multinational clients, ranging from oil and gas, banking, to telecom, manufacturing, and utilities. At the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, she's currently chairing the tax committee and has previously chaired the local content committee. She's a highly achieved lady, I must say. She's a member of the Africa List. For those who don't know this is a select community of next generation CEOs in Africa and in most exciting growth markets. I welcome you, Pamela, and I invite you to take us through this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosette. Good morning, our viewers. You are all most welcome to this session this morning. It's an Operation Resilience session. The session is hosted by Total E&P. For those of us that don't know Total E&P, it is one of our biggest players, significant players in the petroleum sector in Uganda, and they're partnering with the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, as well as Tallow this morning. This discussion is the last of 3 discussions that have been held in this season starting August 2020. And it is a session that has been organized for suppliers and prospecting suppliers. It's a supplier development session. The purpose of these engagements, the past 2 and this one that we're having this morning, is to help both suppliers and prospecting suppliers in the oil and gas sector to figure out how to remain afloat in the current tough times that we find ourselves in, but also looking beyond into the future. So for today's session, our speakers are first of all going to give us an update in terms of the developments in the oil and gas sector. For those of us that have been following events in the oil and gas sector, you've had what they call the FID, which we expect to be, in the very near future. And therefore, this is a very critical time for those hoping to play in this sector to be able to prepare themselves to remain relevant and resilient, so that when the time comes to tap into the opportunities, we are all ready to tap into those opportunities. So our speakers will help us understand where we are at in the sector in terms of recent developments, and then we will discuss in detail what operational resilience means to us and what businesses should be doing to remain operationally resilient. In terms of our program for the day, we are hoping to close this at about 12:30. We are going to have somebody speak to us from Total. I will introduce them shortly. We will have our guest speaker from the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. We have a team of panelists here that are going to be speaking on different topics around operational resilience in general, but also health and safety. So we will aim to have a Q&A session at the end, about 30 minutes. So I will encourage you to push through your questions as we get along with the presentations of each of the speakers that you see here. Just keep posting the questions in the tab in your link. And then at the end, in the last 30 minutes, we will tackle those questions. So with those brief remarks, I would now like to introduce our first speaker, who is our keynote speaker as well and comes from Total E&P, our host this morning. The speaker is Pierre Jeswa, who is the general manager at Total E&P in Uganda. He's been the general manager since August 2018. He brings a wealth of experience in the sector. Pierre has been working in different countries. You can read his CV or his bio right there on the screen, but he has experience as managing director of Total E&P from Congo, previously where he was before he joined Uganda, and many other countries. So I will not spend so much time speaking about him, but I will now invite him to give us a keynote speech before we then move to the next part of the program. Most welcome. Stay tuned in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to our national content webinar on operational resilience. For Total Group, the Uganda project is of significant importance. As such, the company is confident in the progress of the Lake Albert projects, as witnessed by our purchase of additional interest in the project from Tullow Oil in line with group strategy. Total commitment has also remained unwavering despite the COVID-19 disruption. We have continued to sequentially work alongside our JV partners and the government of Uganda and Tanzania to conclude other prerequisites for the achievement of the final investment decision, the FID, for the Tilenga Uganda and the associated crude oil export pipeline, ECOP. These prerequisites include the discussions on the commercial and legal agreements such as the Host Government Agreement, HGA, shareholders and transport tariff agreements, the SHA and the TTA, among others. Recently, we concluded negotiations on the Uganda HGA and the entrance of UNOC within the JOA in a meeting chaired by His Excellency the President of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and our CEO, Mr. Patrick Pouyanné. This development triggered the intergovernmental meeting between President Museveni and President Magufuli, where the two governments agreed to expedite the harmonization of pending issues to include the Tanzanian HGA and other key components which are necessary to speed up the implementation of the integrated projects. Specifically, on national content, in all its operations worldwide, Total considers national content a key priority for the success of its operations. Our approach in Uganda is cognizant of the context, and we developed a national content strategy aimed at maximizing the use of local manpower, local goods and services, as well as fostering capacity building and knowledge and technology transfer. The strategy was created in line with the national content regulations of Uganda and is aimed at developing the competencies of local suppliers to support economic growth within and outside the oil and gas sector. To restart the project activities in Uganda, the company has relaunched some call for tender processes that include engineering, procurement, supply and construction, EPSC, drilling and wells, and enabling infrastructures for the Tilenga, and call for tenders for ECOP projects. Within the COVID-19 constraints, we have worked with Ministry of Health and other government agencies to safely restart stakeholders' engagement and land acquisition activities. Even within the COVID-19 constraints, we continue to organize supplier development forums to create awareness of the upcoming opportunities via webinars, and this is one of them. A resumption plan is also being developed to take into account appropriate standard operating procedures, the SOP, to enable us to safely continue with the welder and heavy goods drivers training programs as planned for in our work program, among others. Way forward. No doubt we are working in a complex context. However, as a company, we continue to demonstrate our commitment to the development of the Lake Albert project and the achievement of the FID targeted for 2020 as revealed through the aforementioned activities. Once FID is achieved, we should all be able to see an influx of activities in the sector and the emergence of various opportunities whereby, if prepared, we should all be able to contribute meaningfully in our various capacities, directly or indirectly. As I conclude, I wish to thank you for the enthusiasm that you have shown towards wanting to play a part in Ugandan's oil journey. Professionalism, open dialogue, and the commitment to national content development remain key as we implement the various strategies and continue to work alongside all our suppliers and business partners. We therefore thank you for your continued engagement, feedback, and support as we all continue to work together towards the achievement of Uganda's first oil. Thank you.
Okay, so that was our keynote speech from PL.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry about that. That was our keynote speech from PL. Thank you very much, PL. We appreciate that setting the scene for today's session. I will invite our next speaker, Agre Mugume. So Agre Mugume, just on my left, is an enterprise development officer with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. And Agre's key role in his current role is to support local enterprises, local companies in Uganda to get prepared to participate in the oil and gas sector in Uganda. And that means that he is the person you should go to in case you have questions around what you need to do to participate in the sector. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Agre to give us his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Agre Mugume is my name, Enterprise Development Officer with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. So who are we as Petroleum Authority of Uganda? The Petroleum Authority of Uganda came into place as a result of the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Act of 2013, as well as the Petroleum Refining, Conversion, Transmission, and Midstream Storage Act of 2013. And the Petroleum Authority of Uganda started its operations fully in the year 2016. And the Petroleum Authority of Uganda majorly is to monitor and regulate the exploration, development, and production, together with refining, gas conversion, transportation, and storage of petroleum in Uganda. So the purpose why the PAU, or the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, why we exist to contribute to Uganda's socio-economic transformation through efficient and sustainable petroleum resource management. And the vision is to be a leading petroleum regulatory agency. Of course, our mission is to regulate and monitor the petroleum sector in order to create a lasting value for society, contribute to Uganda being a sound investment decision. So having looked at that, why we exist. So what is the overview of the projects? Where have we reached? The total oil discovered so far within the country are 6.5 billion barrels. And in Uganda, the exploration success rate has been around 87% compared to the worldwide average of 25%. This means that for exploration taking place for 10 wells, then 8 will come out positive. It will come out successful. So it means there's a very, very big positive trend in our oil and gas sector. The estimated investment to commercialize the oil of 6.5 billion barrels in 3 to 5 years, we are looking at around $15 to $20 billion that will be invested. And this will be in the different projects, development of over 15 fields, taking around 8 to 9 billion. When you go to the right, my presentation on the map, you'll find that up, there will be near the Noya, up there, Albert Graben, there'll be Noya district, and that's where you have the Terenga oil fields that are run by mainly Total. And downstream, you find the district of Burisa and Chikube, where there is Kingfisher, mainly run by Sinok. And those are the oil fields, when the development of that area take around 8 to 9 billion. The construction of supporting infrastructure, the industrial area, airport, roads, roughly $1 billion will be spent. Then the construction of the refinery, $4.5 billion, and mainly they will have the Albert Graben Refinery Consortium, the Albert Graben Refinery Consortium, where we have the different companies taking on that role of the refinery, but Uganda's interests are being catered for by the national oil company. Have crude export pipeline, the ECOP, as the general manager Total had talked about it, $3.5 billion, and look at a new round of petroleum exploration, have a second round of petroleum licensing ongoing up to 30th of September. So we call upon the other companies, having looked at the success rate of 87%, so more prayers need to come in. What is the progress made so far? In those projects we've looked at, the FEED, the front-end engineering design, has been completed. The environmental social impact assessment is done, and the resettlement action plan is done. So there's a big way we have moved. And of recent, there has been signing of the HGA, the host government agreement between Total E&P and the Ugandan government. Just had already talked about it. Then there's MOU signed between the Ugandan government and the Tanzanian government to fast track the ECOP activities, the pipeline activities. So this has set a very good step towards the achievement of the FID, or the final investment decision, as it had already been talked about by the general manager of Total. We have the key players that we've been working with closely, Talo, Sinok, Total, recent Talo farm down, and the key players will be Total and Sinok. Then we have the Ama Energy and Oranto, which is at the exploration stage. Ama Energy in Kanyotaba, and Oranto and Ngasa Deep and Ngasa Shallow. So those are the companies so far are playing a key role. Of course, with our national oil company, UNOC, which has already made an agreement with the other international oil companies that we work with to play its role. So having looked at that, and there's a good positive trend towards the FID, it takes me to the key issue for today's webinar, the operational resilience in the oil and gas sector. We're looking at the operational resilience, the ability to continue providing business services in the face of adverse challenges. So we are saying our businesses, our companies, bend but don't break. Hold on as we move on. So why the resilience? We have a role to promote national participation, so we need players in the sector. The nature of the sector, that's the oil and gas sector, is volatile. The volatility comes in many ways. Price fluctuations of recent, there has been COVID-19, delayed final investment decision, the effects of green revolution that may come into play some roles, the oil spills, overall the geopolitics in the oil and gas industry. And oil is a global product and affected by other international conditions, hence the need to build resilience mechanisms to withstand the storm. So we are saying the geopolitics within the oil and gas, there is volatility. And you cannot tell what's happening tomorrow. So there is need to build resilience. The companies involved in the oil and gas, there's a need to build resilience so that you can hold on and take on the role as we are moving towards the FID. Of course, at the peak, we expect a lot. More than 13,000 jobs will be there, and as I've already talked about, around $20 billion in investment. The initiatives to build operational resilience, what have we done to build the operational resilience of companies? There's been training with Stanbic Bank that has been going on to build the capacity of companies that we have here in Uganda, and promoting transferable skills. We are saying as you build resilience, you need to ensure that the skills you acquire do not only apply in the oil and gas sector, but can also be moved to other sectors within the economy when the oil and gas activities are low. The National Oil and Gas Talent Register, where we register most people that register on the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, we have programs for them and we build their capacity. Continuous training by the key players, the international companies, for expertise and opportunities outside the country and within. So we are looking at the support from oil companies. They have been doing it and they continue to do it, and this will go a long way to build the operational resilience. The National Supplier Database supports joint ventures. We are saying that the oil and gas companies that may be local, you can build or you can get involved in joint ventures with other companies, whether international or local, so that you reduce the risk as well as you build your capacity, and it will help you build your operational resilience at the time when the activities are going low. And in conclusion, the efforts in meeting the oil and gas standards will make Ugandan enterprises globally competitive. The stakeholders need to keep an eye on other sectors and opportunities outside the oil and gas sector. We are saying that the stakeholders or companies, enterprises involved in oil and gas shouldn't only look at oil and gas sector as an end, but when you build your capacity, you should be able to look into other sectors within the economy. Continue collaborating with both local and international firms for exposure and improved competencies. This brings in the issue of joint ventures. When you're involved in a joint venture, then you've built your capacity and you collaborate with international companies, and this will bring exposure to your business. The Industry Enhancement Center that we are working together with Total and P will help build capacity of enterprises for oil and gas sector, and this will bring in the resilience we are talking about. Adopt industry-based practices, governance systems, and structures to enhance business ability to withstand shocks. There is need to have standards and practices that are international, and then the governance systems. This will help our enterprises to withstand the shocks that come in after looking at the volatility within the oil and gas sector. And last but not least, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Total E&P Uganda Limited, Taro Uganda Operations, together with their partners for enabling this dialogue despite the challenging times caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Agri. You will agree with me that Agri has given us excellent insight into what is happening in the sector at the moment. And I believe that for those that have listened to him intently, there are a number of terms he has used: FID, National Supplier Database, Talent Register. If you want to know more about those terms, what they mean for you and for us as interested stakeholders in the sector in Uganda, please do post your questions and we will address them in the question and answer session. Thank you, Agri. So our next speaker is going to be one of the panelists. So we are going to start off with a session on health and safety, and we're going to listen from the perspective of the operators and also from the perspective of the players. So we are going to have the first speaker from Total E&P. It's John Engole. Mr. John Engole is the Health, Safety and Environment Management Systems Engineer at Total E&P in Uganda. He's majorly responsible for guiding the company in risk management pertaining to operations, drafting and implementing health and safety procedures, and he's also tasked with making sure that he monitors the safety performance indicators and advising management in that context. John, you are most welcome this morning to speak to us about HSC for the listeners this morning.
Thank you, Pamela. Good morning, viewers. What are the operator health and safety requirements? What are the operator health and safety requirements? Health, safety, and environment plays a key role in the performance of a contractor or supplier. The HSC, or Health, Safety, and Environment overall evaluation, or the overall evaluation of a contractor will be very important. And of course, we have different facets in that, which includes health and safety. So for every company, health, safety, and environment should be a priority and a core value for a company. And so to start with, a contractor will be evaluated based on their HSC performance, and this, of course, will be right from a preparation phase through the contract execution, and then finally when the contractor is demobilized. One of the main objectives of an operator, in this case is alignment of the contractor health and safety management system with that of the operator. And these management systems usually follow a PDCA management mode, or what we could call a management cycle of management of health and safety risks. So the contractor will be expected to identify, map, and control all the possible risks relating to the project activities within their scope. And of course, we do have existing risks. Just to give an example, malaria. And if you're involved in construction, for instance, you have activities such as lifting. So all those are major risks and existing risks. But of course, we have to look at the additional risks in the business. Businesses keep evolving with time. And so it is important and vital for a company to keep looking out for the additional risks. COVID-19, of course, here could be the best example of an additional risk that every business should be looking at and managing, okay? So the requirements are based on a risk level. We do categorize risks right from a high risk, medium, and then a low risk. Just to give an example, if you're involved in construction and do a lot of lifting, we will put you in the category of a high risk company or activities. And then, of course, if you are, say, doing minor maintenance on site, you will be categorized in a medium risk. And then if you're doing simple consultancy on site or IT maintenance, we could put you in a category of a low risk. So all HSE contractual requirements are based on are drawn from the level of risk, okay, inherent in the activity. So for all these risks, we do have what we would say are management system elements or principles. Total has its principles. We have 10 principles, but of course these will vary or depend on the operator. Some might have more risks, some might have more elements and others less elements. So just to highlight the elements that we use to evaluate a contractor or supplier is one, we will look at the management leadership and commitment. As we all know, commitment is all about investing time and money. And so we will look at all these areas of how management of a company do invest time and money in health and safety arrangements. And then, of course, we look at the compliance with laws and regulations. We will expect a contractor to map out or identify all the relevant laws pertaining to their operations. And of course, as well as international standards and regulations. And then, of course, risk management, how they plan on managing the risk pertaining to their activities. Operational accountability, here we talk about things like protection of the environment. It's important that we protect our environment. And then, of course, safeguarding of health. This is where we have health risks existing and those that we forecast we might have in the project. Of course, to give examples, I mentioned a few of them. Malaria is an existing risk, health risk, COVID-19, and others. And then how the contractor plans on managing their subcontractors, okay? Their competencies and trainings, okay? Are they competent enough to do the job? What relevant trainings do they have in place? And then how prepared they are to manage emergencies. COVID-19 is an emergency, for example. So how prepared are you to manage emergencies? COVID-19 is just one of those pandemics, but through the life cycle of a company or companies, we have had so many COVID-19s, okay? So some of these have been on a smaller scale, so it may be easy to miss them, but we have had, as companies, COVID-19 pandemics or crises. So it's important for a company to know how they will be able to have continuity in business as far as emergency preparedness is concerned. And then, of course, we'll look at how you plan to manage your incidents, okay? If you have incidents are areas to learn from. And what is important here is to learn from every mistake and every incident or accident that happens on site. So how prepared are you to manage incidents once they happen, and what action plans would you have in place to improve yourself? And then, of course, we will look at what programs you have to audit and inspect your companies. And this is the area of checking your management system to see that actually what you planned to have in place at the beginning of the year is actually coming to fruition. And then also, at the end of the day, you expect to have continual improvement in a company. Every business has to improve, okay? So like I said, you learn from your mistakes, but then you have to keep improving. So based on the results or the checks you've done during your audit, inspections, or any incident investigations, how do you plan to review procedures in place, practices in place for continual improvement? So in conclusion, having good practices will not give you a good score or evaluation when it comes to, say, a call for tender or your performance. Having 5 temperature guns, for instance, at the entrance of your offices, where the second temperature gun checks or confirms the results of the first, and then the third temperature gun confirms the results of the second, and so on, doesn't mean you have a management system in place that actually works. What we will check as a company or operator in this case will be the existence of a health and safety management system. This is key because a health and safety management system will be a point of reference in case you, as management or anyone in the company or anyone outside the company, has any queries about the arrangements you have in place as far as health and safety is concerned. And then also having an ISO or equivalent certified HSE management system can help facilitate answering most of the requirements from our assessment, okay? And then finally, having trained, qualified, and competent HSE personnel or consultants will also enable you to develop a health and safety management system and make it live. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for that presentation. It gives us a feel of what the expectations are from a health and safety perspective, particularly in the petroleum sector. And we know how critical health and safety is to the oil and gas industry, and therefore this is a topic that is very, very critical for those that are looking to participate in that sector. So to help us appreciate the practical perspective of this topic, we have a gentleman that has been an advisor or is currently an advisor in the area of health and safety, Mr. Justus Tumwesige. Mr. Justus Tumwesige is the Managing Director of Globen Industrial Services. And he has experience previously in the sector itself as he worked for OTEC and Total E&P. He then decided to start his own consulting, and he's consulting in the space of health and safety. And so there's no better person this morning than him to share with us experiences in terms of what he has seen with people that are playing in the oil and gas space, but not just oil and gas space, even manufacturing, agriculture, construction, many other industries, and what sort of gaps, what sort of opportunities he sees. So welcome with me, Justus, to talk to us this morning. Welcome, Justus.
Good morning, our viewers. So my name is Justus Tumwesige, as introduced. I'm a Managing Director, Globen Industrial Services Limited. Globen Industrial Services Limited is a QHSE or Quality Health, Safety and Environment consultancy services company. And we are majorly working with SMEs to develop QHSE management systems that enable them to participate at an international standard. Like you heard from the general manager of Total, so we have a big project in our midst. The standards expected of the Ugandan players won't be different from what expected from international players. So the competition is leveled. The expectations and requirements of the operators, such as Total E&P Uganda, are the same. So Globen Industrial Services is working with SMEs to ensure that they put in place these QHSE management systems to enable them to play in the industry safely. Of course, we also do QHSE trainings and manpower placement for QHSE personnel for those companies that are not yet in position to have a full-time QHSE person on their organogram. So I will be talking about meeting operator HSE requirements. And really, I wanted to start from the point of as a business or as an employer, you are required by the Occupational Safety and Health Act 2006, and the upstream HSE regulations, that is for oil and gas, for 2016, to care, at a minimum, to care for your employees when you deploy them to work. So really, HSE is an obligation of a company or an employer or a business. And so operators will be requiring you to, first of all, protect your employees, and then also protect other people that you're working with at their sites. You will be working with fellow contractors. The clients themselves will be having their staff on site. Where this project is located is in the middle of communities, so you are expected to protect the communities as well. And at the same time, you are required to work in a manner that you do not pollute the environment. The project, Tirenga and the other projects are in very sensitive ecosystems that are being watched by everybody. The project is being scrutinized all over the world, so you cannot make any mistake in terms of HSE. So with all these requirements before us, how do we then, as Ugandan companies, get to participate? My colleague John talked about an HSE management system, and which I really want to delve into. The HSE management system will give every company that intends to play in the industry a framework through which you can meet these requirements that were briefly highlighted by John. To start with, management or leadership of the companies, organizations that intend to play in the industry, must decide and document their commitment to implement HSE. I know that all oil and gas operators will require this for starters, to see that you have committed at a top level to follow HSE. And your commitment should not only be in word, but also in deed. How will the operators prove this? They will need to see that you have put resources in place to ensure that your HSE responsibilities are being discharged appropriately. These resources include people. You need to have people responsible for HSE on your organogram. You need to have equipment that is of integrity. I know one of my colleagues who will speak deals with lifting equipment. For example, if you're going to take a piece of lifting equipment to do oil and gas operations, you must demonstrate that this equipment has been inspected and is not going to endanger the people that are working with it. So you need to provide safe and equipment that is of integrity, and then you must have work instructions or procedures that your team can follow while discharging their responsibilities. Of course, at the same time, you need to walk the talk. You must show exemplarity. That way, you are not saying one thing and doing the other. You're not telling your staff to put on a helmet when the managing director comes on site or in slippers and without a helmet. So what goes for the goose goes for the gander as well. What you tell your staff to do, you must also comply, and that is exemplarity. Number two, you must have a framework through which you identify laws and regulations that govern the business that you intend to engage in. Generally, in Uganda, we have the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which is which encompasses the occupational health and safety responsibilities. But then we have also laws related to environment. Now we have laws related to oil and gas safety, like the the upstream HSE regulations of 2016, and then other specific laws. For example, if you're going to be involved in providing medical services, then you're going to be required to comply with Uganda Medical Practitioners Council. You have to be registered with them. You have to follow all the guidelines and those from the Ministry of Health. So you must be able to assess your business and identify the relevant applicable laws. And then once you've identified these laws, you should periodically review to see if you are complying to them. You need to manage your risks, whether they are technological. For the big contractors, they will definitely have to do technological risk assessments. And then for those that are not doing the big pieces of the project, operational risk assessment has to be done for road transportation, for lifting operations, work at height, and things like those. You must manage your subcontractors, have a criteria to select them, to inspect and to audit them. You must review how they are performing. Those that are performing well, reward them, and those that are flouting the rules, they should be sanctioned. You should be able to build competence in your team, and this is done by doing a training needs assessment, developing a training program, providing training resources, and then assessing the competence from time to time. You need to have an emergency plan in place. You need to have teams that have been trained to handle emergency. And like John already alluded to, when incidents happen, learn from them, investigate them, and then be able to take corrective actions. You must, from time to time, audit your HSE management system, have teams trained and able to audit. So here we are. Our clients that we are hoping to work with, Total and the partners, are not backing down because of COVID-19 or any other issues that are coming up. They are instead beefing up. So we must be resilient. We must follow suit. Don't loosen up. Don't let down your guard. Keep it up. And let's take the share of the 15 to 20 billion in the 3 years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice, for giving us a bit more perspective into the HSE requirements in the oil and gas sector. I hope those questions are coming in, because it is critical that we all participate and we keep the questions coming, because the gentlemen are here this morning to make sure we understand what those requirements are and we are well prepared to participate in the sector, because the opportunity is now. So make sure the questions are coming in. We will respond to them in the last 30 minutes of this session. So the next part of the program then goes into operational resilience. Having looked at the health and sector requirements, we have two gentlemen that are going to speak to us about broader perspectives or aspects of operational resilience. The first gentleman on that topic is Mr. Edrisa Kwizera. Edrisa is Head of Development at Tullow, Uganda. Tullow, Uganda is one of the key players as well in this sector, and they have partnered with Total to bring to us this session this morning. Those of us that are familiar with the oil and gas sector, it starts off with the exploration and then goes into development before we get into production. So we are at that stage of development where we are preparing to go into production, and Edrisa is responsible for that development phase at Tullow. He specifically is leading execution of one of the blocks and making sure that they meet the obligations. He provides input to the technical team in terms of de-risking this phase of the project. And he manages key operational issues for this transition period, working with big team, engineers, operations, and the rest of the technical team. So welcome with me, Idrissa, to talk to us from an operator perspective what operational resilience looks like. Over to you, Idrissa.
Thanks, Pamela. Thanks for having me. Good morning to all of those who are following us on this webinar. I think like Pamela has mentioned, and I think it was deliberate that we go through the EHS aspects of things, but at this point, I think we felt that it was important to discuss one of the key elements that underpin the understanding of operational requirements. And I'll take you through the oil and gas cycles, and you will quickly realize that in many respects it's more of a refresher, but what I'll try and bring home is some of the key milestones and elements that relate to our own development. I would also like to say up front that it's a cycle, as you will see, my presentation will be focused very much on the cycle that has progressed significantly, which is this Lake Albert development. But as you have heard from my colleague from PAU, there might be other cycles that take off within the country. As you know, this development accounts for a small fraction of the resources in Uganda. So you have to be mindful, especially as national suppliers, that you could be involved in this advanced cycle, but there will be a requirement for you to also pick onto the other cycles which are starting. As you have seen, there are other players who are on the exploration phase. So I'll present to you in three parts, really. I'll give you an overview of this oil and gas cycle. I'll also just highlight to you some of the things that impact a typical cycle. And finally, I think what is very, very important is just to share my perspective on what some of the points you could consider as a way of adapting as a national supplier to these cycles. So a typical oil and gas cycle will have four phases. And this is what my company really puts in many of the literature you will see on our website. The first phase is exploration and appraisal phase. So what happens in this phase? And we have all lived through this phase. Typically, once the oil and gas companies have been licensed, they will come into the country and engage in a significant phase of collecting data through seismic, through geophysical data acquisition, with the express purpose of understanding the quantity of oil in the ground. The next thing, of course, companies will drill an initial well, and after a discovery, and you had my colleague mention about the discoveries that we have, after a discovery, more wells will be drilled for purposes of appraising and exploring and understanding the volume of oil. Now, for the case of Uganda, as I said, I'll try and highlight to you some of the key milestones. In the case of Uganda, for this current development, this exploration and appraisal phase started around 2004 proper and ended around 2013 in that period. So you can see about 9 years. And we have indicated this period will normally, these phases will normally last between 2 and 10 years. Once you have finished your exploration and appraisal phase, you quickly move into the development phase. This phase will typically be between 3 and 10 years. And what do we do during this phase? Oil and gas companies will prepare field development plans. Field development plans are extensive documents that have considerations to environment, technical, operational issues, and they are submitted to the government for consideration. Now, in the case of, again, this project, we started this exercise around 2014 and ended around 2016. Once these documents are submitted to government, the government considers them, there is extensive discussion, and it culminates in the government issuing production licenses. And most of us will remember that in August 2016, a key milestone was registered in Uganda when the government issued 8 production licenses, 3 over Block 1 and 5 over Block 5. You'll also recall that 1 license had already been previously issued over Kingfisher in 2012. So in the development phase, that's one of the key elements, which is the field development plans leading into production licenses. Once the companies have obtained production licenses, and this is where we are today as we speak to you, is the companies will engage in making sure the project is both technical and commercially ready through several phases of de-risking. As Pamela mentioned to you, this is one of the areas that has kept us so busy. From a technical standpoint, some of the things that are done as part of the risking is to undertake front-end engineering and design, to carry out environmental impact assessments, to engage in land access and resettlement planning exercises, as my colleague from PAU mentioned. And I'm glad to mention that from a technical standpoint, that this project is quite mature, okay? And as you have heard from Pierre in his opening speech, there are some other commercial aspects that needs to be matured, and we're also seeing signs that these are also coming to the end. Once you have both technical and commercial maturity on the project, then the companies look to take the final investment decision. We are all anticipating that this is really imminent, the final investment decision. Once the final investment decision has been taken, then the companies will embark on constructing the infrastructure needed to produce the oil. So you can see these are the building blocks within the development phase where we are today. Field development plans, obtaining production licenses, doing commercial and technical de-risking, taking FID, and building the infrastructure needed to produce the oil. And you will see why this is important in the theme of resilience, because for us to understand these cycles will equip us to be able to also anticipate and develop our capacities accordingly. So in the case of Uganda, as you can see, these are the key milestones as we're working on. Once you finish the development phase, we quickly go into the production phase. Now, for the case of Uganda, the next two phases really are looking forward. So production phase is where, of course, we produce the resource that we have in the ground. Typically, this will be between 20 and 50 years, and the determining factor is really the production license period, but also the resource that you have in the ground. I've been blessed to support in the last couple of years working in a producing environment in Ghana, and I know that the government and other officials have visited this field in the Gulf of Guinea, which has been producing for 10 years, and my role as leading operation assurance activities has given me an insight of how a producing facility, a producing asset, all the interacting aspects come into play. And I'm confident that we have what it takes as Uganda to be able to go into this phase and be able to move forward. So we are really looking forward to this next phase. The last phase in this cycle is decommissioning. This will typically take 3 to 10 years. Now, you don't hear a lot of these people talk about this phase, but it's an important phase. Every competent oil and gas company makes an allowance for this phase, because you have to put money aside, and knowing that after the 20 to 50 years, when production ceases, you have to restore the sites in the decommissioning phase. Now, of course, this is way too in the future, but for completeness, I have to state it here as a key phase of the oil and gas cycles. We have experience as Tullow. We are currently decommissioning in some of our old assets in the North Sea in the UK, and I invite you to go to our website, tullowoil.com. You will see some of the details on these websites. In summary, these are the four phases within an oil and gas cycle, but you cannot say cycles typically without mentioning some of the attending key features, such as what we have experienced in the first quarter of this year, which was an oil price crash, but also the pandemics like we're experiencing right now. The important thing before I move away from this slide is, even as we look at a typical oil and gas cycle, we have to keep a look ahead with what is an emerging energy transition conversation. So as supplier development, I saw a very important comment from PAU, look beyond oil and gas. Very, very important. I just want to spend the next 4 or 5 minutes just to highlight, and I hinted on some of these, what really affects a typical oil and gas cycle. So there are several factors, but I'll just sample a few of them. Technical factors. The obvious one, if you have a complex field, it will take much longer for you to be able to obtain data. You know, some fields are more complex than others. Onshore is not the same as offshore development. Infrastructure is an obvious one. If you have a hard-to-reach facility, especially in the exploration phase, it will take you much longer for you to be able to finish this phase. The next one is social, political, and regulatory factors. Social, for example, we have come with this industry, and it's a fairly new industry in Uganda. As my colleague mentioned, it takes much longer for you to be able to acquire land, let's say in Blissa area, than you would maybe in some other provinces, let's say in the Middle East. Okay, so a social component is very, very important. And commercial aspects also do impact these phases of the cycle. This is a multi-billion-dollar investment, like my colleague mentioned. And sometimes one of the things that leads to the delay of agreeing is having different views on how to progress. Misalignment is a key factor that leads to the that impacts the length of the phases in this cycle. So these are just a few of the things I think could be put forward as influencing factors. I would like to end probably on a note of just highlighting, and my colleague has really mentioned a few of them. What then do we need to do as national suppliers to adapt to these phases? The first thing is seek for knowledge. Such webinars, and before this webinar, many other workshops before have been held by oil and gas companies. But also as national suppliers, let's go and seek for information, learn about the cycle, and anticipate, develop strategies. Develop strategies in addition to the tactics that you have that are currently taking you through the current phase. The second point I would like for you to take away today is skills development. My colleague mentioned about training. Skills development and leadership is key here. So please make sure you have the right skills for the next phase. Anticipate the phase that is coming. The other point, and again my colleague mentioned about it, is about working together. So I encourage all national suppliers to leverage on synergies. Leverage on synergies. We have seen many cases. I've been around this industry for 8 years now, and we have seen many cases where companies are awarded contracts. It is much better for you to look for someone who has competencies you don't have at that point in time, as opposed to try and develop the competencies overnight. The final point I would like to emphasize is that let's have discipline and prudence in how we apply our capital expenditure. Most of us who have driven on these routes to Hoima or to Bulisa, you have seen on either side of the road significant amount of infrastructure. That's capital that is probably idle. We have to be prudent. Have we considered leasing as opposed to outright purchases, and so on and so forth? The key message here is have discipline in application of our capital expenditure. So these are some of the points that I would like to share with you, and I would like to stop there and thank you. I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Idrissa, thank you. Thank you very much. That was brief and to the point. I think the key messages I had from there is, one, it is very critical that we anticipate the cycles. The oil and gas sector is an interesting one. It has, cycles, ups and downs, different factors that impact it. So the ability to anticipate what would happen is critical, and also gives us the ability to prevent ourselves from finding ourselves, going deep and failing to overcome the challenges that could potentially be posed by the sector. But I also hear that we have to have strategies in place to be able to address those incidents or eventualities in the event that we have tried the prevention and the anticipation and it's still not worked. We need to be resilient enough to recover and also to adapt to what the sector presents to us. So thank you so much, Idrissa, and as he has mentioned, he will take questions at the end, so please keep them coming. Our last panelist is a very renowned businessman, Jeffrey Baitwa. Jeffrey, or Jeff as we call him, is one of those people that has been in the oil and gas sector from the very beginning. And so choosing him to be part of this panel is not by chance, not by mistake. It's because he has experienced what it means to work in the oil and gas sector. Jeffrey is the co-managing director for the Bro Group, and the Bro Group comprises a number of companies. There's Three Ways Shipping Limited, there's Three Ways Distribution Limited, and then TransTrack Limited. It's a logistics, forwarding, freight forwarding and logistics company or group of companies. He's also a treasurer with the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, so we serve together on the council of the Chamber of Mines. Now he'll tell us and consolidate the entire story from health and safety into operational resilience. He's gone over the mountains. He has had successes in the sector. He has had his lessons through, I think he started in 2006. So that is so many years ago. So at the peak of oil and gas exploration, he was around. At the time when things were really silent, he's been around, and he is still around today. So he is a true testimony of operational resilience, and hence the choice for his presence this morning. So welcome with me, Mr. Jeff Baitwa to share his experience in operating in the oil and gas sector. Jeff, you're welcome.
Thank you, Pamela. I'll just adjust this. Thank you, Pamela, for that intro. And I also like to thank our hosts, Total and the joint venture partners, for having me around. To all those following us on the webinar, good morning to you all. Obviously, the intro has been done, but I'll not waste time. I'll also try and talk about who we are as Bro Group. So a group overview of us: we are a 100% indigenous company. In other words, we are fully owned by Ugandans. We're two brothers. Those are our farms or subsidiaries, 3O's Shipping Services, that majors into clearing and forwarding. We operate in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. We have affiliates in also other countries in the neighborhood. Transtruck, it's an asset-based business owning over 185 trucks. We used to have 150, but we scaled down due to the bad times. We also offer lifting services and also do carry out abnormal and heavy load transportation. 3O's Distribution is a light commercial truck operator that does nationwide distribution, packing and removals, repatriation, and those kind of things. So right in the corner is a brief about the nature of our services for those of you who are watching the screen. The pictorial represents some of the undertakings we've taken in the transportation and lifting activities across the region, across into DRC, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, South Sudan, and into Tanzania itself. One of the key things we tried to develop was heavy haulage, which is abnormal loads or out-of-gauge loads. So we invested quite a lot in that kind of equipment, giving us the ability to carry over 100 tons of one piece of cargo. So these are some of the pictorials of some of the activities we've been doing over so many years. Our clientele, as displayed there. So, like Pamela mentioned, we've had our success and we also had some bad times. But what is key is everything is a setback. If you keep that mindset that everything is a setback, then you keep on your journey. You don't give up. So on our side, we don't mainly do oil and gas, but we tend to be related to oil and gas a lot because of our involvement in it. But we also do a lot of any other business, not necessarily to do oil and gas. We do transportation of containers. We do transportation of many other things. We can clear your stuff. We can ship it from abroad into your country and from the country to overseas. From my experience with the oil and gas, coming to this, I got into the oil and gas sector, or the business got into the oil and gas sector sometime back in 2006. I think we had just missed the Turako wells. We didn't participate in the Turako wells. Those are the 3 wells drilled by Heritage Oil and Gas somewhere in Toronto. But we later caught up with the activity when the activities moved further north into the Kaisotonya area. And at that time, Hardman was drilling. They did the first well. I remember it was about Christmas time. Waraga results were mentioned. The finding was, the discovery was put into the papers. And that's when I started getting more interest in the oil and gas. Fortunately, one of my colleagues, Richard Magezi, who we had known earlier on, told me there was a need for trucks to move the rig somewhere in Kaisotonya to the next well. And that was our first step into this business. I remember driving to Hoima. That time the road was Maram, to Hoima. And between Hoima and Kaisotonya, it took us almost the whole day to get down to the escarpment. Today you can go to Kaisotonya, I think, in 2 hours or less from the Tarmac Road. But it was an interesting experience for me. There was no infrastructure and we had to get there. Finally, we got our old trucks there and did some work.
they were actually a relief, though they were very old leakages here and there. To the players, it was quite a relief. Our trucks had come and we did the work. We earned some money and everything was looking good. So we did the next wells, which were the importers. About the same time, Hardman sold out to Tullow. Tullow came into play. At that time, Hardman, Heritage Oil were the big players in the industry. They didn't push so much for standards as we were to experience later on with Tullow. So when Tullow came in, our old trucks soon became fake trucks. And before we knew it, we had been kicked out for operating a fleet of trucks that are leaking oil and blah, 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 blah. So when the exploration moved further north to Tai Tai, and I think the next well was somewhere around Kigogole, Tullow kicked us out and other players came in, and I think one of them was a die-hard competitor, Trans-East from Kenya. They had the equipment. Their trucks were looking smart, they were new. So they took over the work, and we were on the sidelines. But we didn't give up again. We came back into play. We looked for money. We had to buy the trucks. Unfortunately, around the same time, Total came and also farmed in, and Sinok. Then there was a huge exploration phase ahead of us, very high impact, and they required a lot of equipment. So companies like ours, we had to find money to invest in assets, we had to invest in the people, we had to invest in standards, we had to invest in certifications, trainings. So there was a lot to do almost in a short time. And people will appreciate there was nothing. So we took the risk, invested in all this. Our fleet increased from 30 trucks to almost 150 trucks in the period of 1 year. We had no cranes. We are now operating 15 cranes and other lifting equipment. So there was a lot going on. It was exciting. A lot going on. You have the contracts. We had the contract with Sinok. We had the contract with Tullow. We had the contract with Total. And they're all related. So it was quite an exciting time for us then. We did the work. Indeed, we did the work and were successful. And I think we got our accolades for the work we did in all those areas. But my point here is that because of there being nothing, we had to invest a lot. Because sometimes people say, oh, you guys overinvested. Didn't you know this was going to happen? But we had to do that. There was no choice. You could not find a truck in the market to rent. If they were there, there were few for the demand. And we also had other clients to serve. So for us going forward, the investment wasn't a problem. The rapid growth, obviously, was part of what we experienced. We had to learn quickly on the job and also do a lot of things. So these are the two aspects that I find were quite challenging for us then. But when the exploration ended and the dust settled, we were sitting with 400 staff. Because you've got to remember, in the oil and gas business, for almost every task job in the field, you need 2 people. So the reason is they want you to rest your people. Every 4 weeks, people are working. The other 4 weeks, they are resting. And this is still part of the strategy to bring down or to manage risk in terms of safety. So it's much cheaper for the oil and gas company to have 2 people on a job than the risk associated with the failure that comes along. So we had almost 150 trucks operating 200 drivers, 10 cranes, almost 40 staff. So all these task people were within us. And unfortunately, on our part, we kept these people on because we knew we had 2 years to go to the next phase, which is where we are right now, or what we're looking at right now, the production. So the prolonged transition from exploration to production started hitting us. In the end, we suffered a bit on the business side, and I think, but we've kept our heads up and have been able to survive up to this point. But for that phase, those are the lessons. Now going forward, obviously, as an entrepreneur, we have issues, challenges that we face. Finding the right people to manage a $40 million business in this country is not very easy. And also, as a business, we need to have our governance structures right and put ourselves in the perspective of managing a $40 million business. The moral story here is business versus moral. After the exploration phase, we had an opportunity to lay off people, but we didn't because we thought we'd keep them on and give them a livelihood. So the lesson we learned after that is that when things go down, you must offload your costs immediately. And I think going forward, we may not be having that high moral on our part. But also, then when things are not going well, finding alternative financing in this market, because sometimes you don't need debt. Most of the debt in the market is commercial. So those are the challenges we've encountered. But in the end, it's key, keep faith, because faith will lead you to hope. And once you have hope, then you develop the grit. Because with hope, then you aspire every other day, and that is grit. And again, it's important for one to always view your situation, whether good or bad, most so when bad, as a temporary setback, because if you give up and not take this as a temporary setback, then most likely you're putting yourself out. But if you take this as a temporary setback, the beauty is one is able to learn the lessons and put their energies together for the future. So looking ahead, my thoughts at night, we've all been waiting for this time, and right now, the time is nearing. I think all indications are this time it will happen, unless miracles happen. But let's keep it that. The question many people put up to me is, by the way, is it easy for one to participate? What does it take for one to participate in this oil and gas? Is it possible with all these standards and ABCD, one can participate? Indeed, yes, one can participate because as a local company, we've shown that we were able to participate. And we met all this. We had to be kicked out, we came back in, eventually we participated. And we also won a number of accolades during the process. I think Total gave us one of the best safety players in the north. We also had one of the best transport awards. So again, because we put our heads to putting things together, what will it take for us to succeed? We need to be innovative and creative. This opportunity is coming up, but it's not everything. Without a bit of innovation and creativity, one may not get the expectations we're looking out for. We must be competitive. It's going to be competitive because it's happening in the backdrop or in the background of oil pricing. I would like to believe one of the key things for an investor like Total to go ahead with what they are doing is they must bring pricing down. They must bring pricing down so as to allow people to invest. So on our part, we must be prudent, learn from the lessons in the past, how to apply our capital. We should be able to offer relevant solutions and applicable ones. We should find the right winning partnerships amongst ourselves or with overseas players. We should avoid looking at these opportunities as a one-off. This opportunity should not be seen as a one-off. You should use this opportunity to build for your next phase as a business. Invest wisely and share risk. Those are very key aspects for us to take note of. So with time, I think I've been able to say what I had to say. Thank you all for this opportunity once again, and for our listeners and viewers, thank you for participating.
Wow, that's a powerful story there from Jeff. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your experience. Listening to you, I really hear a story of persistence, a story of resilience indeed, not giving up, but again being intentional and preparing to be part of this sector. So it is an encouragement to a number of us as Ugandans, either who have tried and failed or sometimes feel like this is not going to work for us or it's not for us as Ugandans. We have Jeff right here, who is a pure Ugandan company and has been given opportunity to play in the sector just because he has prepared himself. And he's It's not because he's not had challenges. He has had his challenges, but he has worked through those challenges to remain afloat and continue to participate in the sector. So those are the presentations that we have this morning from all our panelists, and we are now going to open this up to the Q&A session. I do have a number of questions already from our viewers. But before I go there, let me recognize the presence of some other members from the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Agre here was a representative on the panel, but we do have James Musherure, who is a Senior National Content Officer in charge of contracts at the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. And he is with us on this forum, and in the Q&A session, we'll be hearing from him. And I do also understand that Betty, who is a manager of national content, is also online with us. So I'll kick this off with a question to the Petroleum Authority. And perhaps before I go to the specific question that has come in from one of our viewers, if you could just help us understand this FID animal. I know it's important to put it in perspective for those that are viewing and listening. They are hearing FID, they are hearing things are about to happen. What is it exactly that is about to happen, and what does that mean for everybody who is viewing and looking to participate? What are we telling them to do, or what are we telling them to prepare themselves to tap into? So, James, if you could give us some comments around that, and then I will go to the questions from the viewers. James.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can, James.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the presenters and the people who are participating in this forum, and the organizers. To go straight into your question of FID, in full is the final investment decision. As the speaker from Talo highlighted, the project has developed in terms of commercial aspects and in terms of technical aspects. So when those two are mature, that means you're now taking on the project into the real construction and real development phase, moving away into the real development. So FID is when the companies commit that now they're taking the project forward, and it marks the beginning of the construction phase. And that means where my colleague Agri was talking about the 20 billion, it's the unlocking factor of investment. That means you're going to set up the development facilities, like the central processing facilities. You're going to set up, going to start construction of the pipeline. You're going to start construction of the refinery when it is, when the company is doing the feeder ready. So for us, FID is that bullet that Mr. Baitwa and the whole team has been waiting for, to unlock the potential finally of oil and gas into construction, and that's where most of the businesses are. So the suppliers, I think, on this forum are all waiting for that decision, so that they will now get into construction phase. A lot of money was spent in exploration, like a 3.4, but it's not the magnitude that we project at FID. So that means there will be opportunities for most of the suppliers, and therefore what we've been preparing for is only unlocked at FID. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. And I think that helps us understand what this means for us. So this oil project is expected to have a shelf life of approximately 25 years to 30 years. And I guess the fear is what happens to all this investment, the infrastructure, the experts in the sector, after those 25 years or 30 years. Is there any potential for other projects to come in on either, along the same lines or totally different? What's your take? What should give Ugandans comfort that I'm not going to have this significant infrastructure investment, and then after a certain period of time, I'm stuck with my investment? James, that's yours as well.
Thank you very much for that question as well. My colleague at the beginning highlighted the processes or the stages that Uganda is going under. Number one, these projects that we are all looking forward to are those projects that have been explored, discoveries made, and they are going into production and commercialization. Now that's where all the energy and talk has been coming from. But government chose a licensing policy where it is gradual increase on the number of licenses given out. Now we have projects that are coming in, because if you note that only 40% of the Albertine is licensed, and the discoveries have been in the 10%. So that means there is 60% not yet licensed, and almost a big chunk where we think we'll have more discovery. So you have Oranto and Ama. Those ones are now doing what the predecessors, the Talos and the Neptunes tried to do before, try and find more oil. And given our success rate of 87%, we are very optimistic that those two companies will find discoveries as well. But also government last year announced another licensing round. So we are expecting more companies, and we've had good feedback despite the COVID. Some people interested in getting more blocks in the Albertine Graben. So as the Total project and CNOOC project develops into that phase of commercialization, there will be more projects coming in that are going through the different phases that of the project. So they will also go through technical phases, or go through agreements of commercial, and they also come into production. So we're looking at the industry being here for 50 to over 100 years with this licensing policy. That is one. So the businesses will be available at all those levels as more discoveries are made. Number two, we are strategically located that across the other side of Uganda, there is Congo with potential. Across Tanzania has made discoveries in gas. You've had Kenya making discoveries. We have our neighbors north in Sudan having oil production. The moment we are able to deliver a project and gain the competencies required for the oil and gas industry, the companies are able to freely now participate in all other countries and also participate in the new industries and having leading examples. We are already witnessing some of the Ugandan companies that have gained skills in the first exploration phase, making moves and now moving into countries like Tanzania, like South Sudan, like Kenya. For example, we have some scaling companies like Tusk who are making moves across East Africa. So I think if the companies develop that potential, then they will be able to participate in other sectors, other countries. But also there is transferability of these resources and the businesses. For example, we know that there are some people who imported like ambulances specifically for the oil and gas business, but COVID came and they were transferred to help the health sector. So these businesses are easily moved or transferred to other sectors of the economy to support. So for me, it's not a worry that there will be a stop in business the moment a person is able to deliver on the oil and gas standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. That is insightful. So what I hear there is that we should not be afraid to invest because there are opportunities, one, to go and invest in other countries. I guess we are used to seeing foreigners coming to invest into Uganda. Here is an opportunity for us as Ugandans to grow ourselves and be able to go and invest in other countries outside of Uganda. So we should not miss that opportunity. And then also the ability to transfer these investments or the infrastructure, the people, and make use of them in other sectors of the economy. I think those are credible solutions to this question. The next question, John, I will direct it to you. It's more around risk and perhaps operational risk. In light of the COVID challenges to the operations and what we've been seeing businesses going through, how do you foresee the management of these operations while maintaining acceptable levels of risk? If possible, share an example.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Thanks for that question. It's a very good question, given the prevailing conditions. I think for any company, the one question that they should ask themselves is, what does the law say? Okay. If we go back to previous slides where we mentioned the management system elements, we did mention the bit of compliance with the laws and regulations. So for every company, it's very important that at a minimum, they do comply with national regulations, okay? Because even as a company, as Total, an operator, we do, when we're developing our procedures or work instructions, we do look at the minimum requirements. And those minimum requirements are drawn from national regulations and standards. And then anything else beyond that is usually our group requirements or operator requirements that are usually more stringent than what is in place. So as far as SOPs, for instance, for COVID-19 is concerned and developing procedures for companies, it would be quite vital that a company develops its own procedures or SOPs in line with the national regulations and, of course, health organizations all over the world, because usually those regulations that the country uses are usually drawn from international or health organizations. So that should be the starting point for any company. And then usually what we do as an operator is we will share with the company, based on what they present, we will share with them what our procedure is as far as managing the risk is concerned on site, which usually is either at a minimum that demanded by the law, national law, or stringent, because usually for any stringency will be based on the resources you have. Sometimes you do not have the resources to go beyond what the national regulations say. So whatever you do has to be reasonably practicable, but in line with the law, okay? So we will guide you as a company, as an operator, we will guide you and tell you, okay, this is what you have presented, so this is what we have, so can we bridge, okay, and have something, some middle ground, something workable for both of us. So usually that is what we do. So we will, for any contract or for those that are existing and those that we will plan to have in the future, this is the procedure, this is the process. We will ask you for what you have in place that meets national regulations or international standards, and then we will share with you what we expect you to deliver on site and have a bridging document of sorts. Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. Just as perhaps following on to what John has said to us, having worked on the side of the operator, being Total, and now you are a business owner, consulting, what are some of the key aspects that a potential service provider should be thinking about, or what should they be considering as they submit contracts, especially from a health and safety perspective? What are the things they should bear in mind, and how should they prepare?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first one, John just talked about it, compliance with the law and regulations. I think that is like very, very key. For example, one of the things that Total will ask, or any other operator, is to see if an intending contractor has a registered workplace. Now, this is provided for in the Occupational Safety and Health Act. You may find someone losing a contract because, or unable to, to proceed to the next stage because their workplace is not registered. So compliance with the law is going to be very, very key. Two is the competence of the team. if you're bidding for a construction job, for example, and you're asked to present CVs for your team, and you do not have, let's say, a registered engineer to oversee a construction, a civil engineering project, then most likely you're not going to have good chances because you've not presented a competent team. The other key issue is your ability to manage emergency situations. Emergency, sometimes people say an emergency is an emergency, I didn't expect it. But in oil and gas, you need to plan for any potential emergencies. I think Mr. Mushere talked about ambulances. If you're going to have 500 people on site, the operator is going to ask, how will you take care of medical aspects? For example, if someone got a cardiac arrest and they're on site, how do you intend to take care of that? Unless you are able to answer how you will do it, then they are unable to trust you with a job that requires you to have 500 people on a site. So these requirements are tailored to the scope and the complexity of the job you're applying for. If you're going to be doing a short consultancy on a site, you have 2 people going to the field. Most likely you're not going to be asked to have the same magnitude of HSE compliance as someone that is going to be on site for 6 months, for 3 months doing lifting or construction activities. So there has to be an element of adaptability. Yeah.
Thanks, Justus. And from your experience working with a number of businesses, specifically Ugandans,
Yes.
what's your feel? Do you think Ugandans are actually at that stage where we are embracing the health and safety requirements? Do you feel we are getting there? Do you feel there's a big gap that we need to be covering? What's your feel?
I think for me, my feeling is very good, is that the level of awareness definitely is not as when Jeff first came in over 10, 15 years ago. And I think Ugandan companies can benefit from experiences like one shared by Jeff. And thank you very much, Jeff, for what you shared. The oil and gas safety standards, like I said in my presentation, are not going to be lowered for Ugandan companies. It is going to be the same standard because the oil and gas industry is an international industry. If you can work here in oil and gas, you should be able to work in Kenya, you should be able to work in the UK. So the standards are going to be the same. There are many, many companies that have realized this, and they are putting systems in place to be able to play at this level. And I want really to encourage our viewers out there and every Ugandan company that intends to participate in the oil and gas sector to embrace standards. The standards can be embraced up to a level of international certification, but also you can develop a management system, and you don't have to certify it as a must, but start somewhere, embrace standards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question goes to Idrissa. Would like to know what services and goods are required during the next 20 to 30 years, not just during development, but even during production. How should Ugandans prepare themselves? What are the opportunities for them?
Thanks, Pamela. I think I have attended several workshops before where I think Total, Talo, and CNOC have actually detailed specifics on the requirements in the production phase. But just to highlight some of them, as I indicated, so that 20 to 50 years or 25 to 30 years period of production, you have infrastructure, you have facilities that are running. So national suppliers have an opportunity in providing in many areas, from provision of transport, like Jeff has mentioned, lifting services, provision of what I call life support services, provision of catering services, security services, provision of camp services. But also, I have to say that even in the core technical areas, for example, production technology, my experience, and I've worked in this region for the last 18 years, I'm confident that technicians, engineers, managers that will be running those facilities, we have them here. We have a little polishing to do on some of the disciplines, but we can also provide that. So there are many also opportunities. I was speaking to Justus just before we started this webinar. Many companies, for example, do not have dedicated EHS professionals. There's an opportunity for companies, for example, to be like a one-stop for provision of some specialized services, where it would not make business sense to have full-time roles in those companies. Maybe some of the companies like Justus's company can have, a bespoke solution for such. So there is a lot of supply requirements. If you look at the construction phase alone, and there has been a dedicated seminar on enabling infrastructure, building materials. People are not going to import most of the heavy building materials. A provision for steel, provision for construction requirements, scaffolding requirements. If you did a survey, for example, today in Uganda, in terms of capability for provision of scaffolding on a large scale, you'd struggle to find this. So these are opportunities here. If you just map on the life cycle of production, during the production phase, consumables, provision of lubricants, provision of fuels, provision of personal protective equipment, you have 400 workers that need coveralls, that need masks, that need ear protection, and so on and so forth. I think that there are so many opportunities that companies can look at, and I think if any of those interested suppliers reaches out to any of the international oil companies, I think that there are databases where we can even go into details and equip the companies on what they can do. I think my colleague from the Petroleum Authority also mentioned standards. There is a separate work stream where standards are being developed, so that even as you prepare to supply goods and services, you have to follow certain standards. UNBS, in partnership with the companies, have been working on those. So my message to the national suppliers would be, as I said, one of the key takeaways here is seek for knowledge. Go and understand how you can play a big part. Some of them are obvious that they have already been in attendance in the last part of the cycles, but some of them you might need to be equipped with understanding how you can actually play a bigger role, especially in the production phase. The oil and gas production, from my experience, even the production phase, in my experience, is not so different from existing process industries we have in the country. There are certain disciplines that we have to enhance because the level of scrutiny in terms of EHS is quite big. What could go wrong in the oil and gas industry is so big. The tolerances are much smaller, okay, in the oil and gas industry. But if you look, if I was speaking to a young process engineer out there who's been working in the process industry, my message to you is that you can also deliver in the oil and gas industry. And for me, that's what I would equip some of the national suppliers to be looking at.
Okay, thank you very much, Idrissa. And to encourage Ugandans, then a number of these services and goods that are ring-fenced for Ugandans. So this information is available with the Petroleum Authority, and we should not shy away from asking for the information and making use of it. Idrissa talked about making use of databases, and I do know that there's a national supplier database, and I would like Agre from Petroleum Authority to speak to us a bit more about this database. When do we register? Is it still open for registration? What are the terms, or what do we require?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pamela. The National Supplier Database that is with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, if you supply or to do work within the petroleum sector, or the oil and gas, you need to register with the National Supplier Database. And it is a requirement that the IOCs the international companies, before they give you work, you should be registered on the National Supplier Database. The National Supplier Database sits with the PAU, Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and so far we have companies that are there, around 1,700 companies, both Ugandan companies and international companies. And when you log on www.pau.go.ug, our website, you'll be able to get details on how you register on the National Supplier Database. So don't wait, or you keep there and you say, the National Supplier Database have not been given work, you wait for the last minute, register there, you get the numbers, or the National Supplier Database number, and then you're able to supply the oil and gas. Not only the National Supplier Database as the data bank, we also have the NOGTR, National Oil and Gas Talent Register, that is for individuals. The other one was for companies. But since the question was very much looking at the National Supplier Database, the NOGTR, or National Oil and Gas Talent Register for individuals, when you also log on, you'll be able to register in. Thank you very much, Pamela.
Okay, thank you, Agre, for that. Let me move to Jeff. Jeff, you've shared your successes as a practitioner in this sector, and someone is interested in knowing how you have handled the issue of financing in order to support your business to the level that has kept you resilient. How have you handled the financing perspective?
Well, so the financing perspective could be looked at in two ways. Obviously, I think they want to know, I believe they want to know in this last period that we've had, am I correct? How we've handled the financing.
It's a general question, so I
Right.
suspect they would like to know, the entire season you've worked in the oil and gas sector, how have you survived, and how have you managed to finance your business to meet the requirements of the sector?
Well, to meet the requirements of the sector, we relied on bank financing, which is commercial banks. And it's always easy to get commercial banks on your side when you have a contract, and they can see the streams of money, the inflows. So that would not be a big challenge, especially if you have a history. Many banks will be willing to give you money for a contract that is in place. The contract should have a good duration. Your numbers must be aligned with the project, with the contract lifespan. So you have to convince the banks that you can pay within that period that the contract will be running. So you have commercial banks on one side. In our recent experience, we've not been able to access commercial bank facilities for obvious reasons. So we've tended to look overseas for financiers, to find some financing solutions. So it hasn't been very easy. We have had to structure and think about solutions that are not open or available in this market. But key has been bringing in, to see if we can bring in equity players. So equity players who like to take risk, but they also have a huge cost, especially when they're exiting. So you have to be mindful of that and try and manage the expectations and come up with a win-win situation where they are not for a kill, but they also get something reasonable or something really appetizing for them to put in their money. So recently we've been relying mainly on equity players who will come in and then sell back the shares back to us, maybe at a later point. Yeah.
So Jeff, what has been your experience, if at all, with development banks, the likes of Uganda Development Bank? Are they able to provide financing for the oil and gas sector, specifically to the local players? And does your role as treasurer of the Uganda Chamber of Mines as well, would you be in position as the Chamber of Mines to support someone is specifically interested in understanding the role of Uganda Chamber of Mines in that space, but I'm personally also I'm interested in understanding whether you have found the likes of Uganda Development Bank helpful.
So my experience with UDB is, obviously we all know the UDB story. They're trying to get in capital. The last time I checked with them, there was that money put forward to them through the government of Uganda to help bring home the manufacturing industry, the manufacturing activities. But the little engagements I had with, or the engagements I had with them, they didn't seem to be having yet a solution for oil and gas, because specifically logistics, because for us we are a logistics player. So whether you're in oil and gas, wherever you are, they're not so keen on logistics. I'm not so sure about the other sectors. Maybe in manufacturing, I believe for those who will be manufacturing for this opportunity, or who would like to grow their capacity to be able to supply, there's access to finance at UDB. I'm confident about that. Maybe we'll continue to engage UDB as players to see what more they can put on the table. But of course, their pockets are limited by the amount of capital they have at their disposal. With regards to the chamber, obviously the chamber is not a financing institution. We have no experience in managing lending out money or ABCD. But what we are trying to do as a chamber is, we have members like who are the commercial banks, we all know. So we are engaging these players to see what solutions they can come up with. For us, the key aspect in financing is cost, the cost of money. And the cost of money in Uganda tends to be quite high. If you're looking at double-digit figures, especially in shillings, you could actually pay 20% sometimes in terms of interest. That's a very, very high cost, and it also acts like something that inhibits one to do what they're capable of doing. Because if you're going to have your cost of finance high, that means your cost of service is also going to be, your service cost will be also high, so you'll not be competitive. And that's one of the key challenges we'll face. Like I mentioned, this oil and gas opportunity is coming against a backdrop of falling oil prices or volatile oil prices. We are not quite stable. I tend to think pricing will be key for all the players in terms of the services and goods they are buying. So we need to work on financing, and if UDB can bring the cost of financing down to a single digit, or at least 10%, or even the players, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, many players may not participate because of the putting themselves out of becoming competitive in terms of their cost structures.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I totally agree with you in terms of the cost of financing, and it's one of the major challenges that this sector faces, and not even just this sector, but even other sectors of the economy. But also to encourage us as Ugandans. In my practice as a tax advisor, as a professional advisor at PwC, we come across companies that have not put their houses in order or books in order. And so even when you go to a bank to borrow money, you know that your records do not tell a good story, and therefore a financier is not very keen to lend you money. So my encouragement to us as Ugandans is to make sure that we put our houses in order as we prepare to participate in this sector. Just as someone is interested in hearing how you're supporting development or building capacity for Ugandans to be able to join the sector from a perspective of health and safety. Can you tell us how you're supporting us as Ugandans?
Yes, so thank you very much. So Graben Industrial Services Limited, this is actually our core job, and that's what we do. So the first thing we tell these SMEs, because majorly we are working with SMEs, is that one, it's possible to build capacity. And we do this through implementation of HSE management systems. I think John and I already briefly explained what an HSE management system entails. And if you've been brave enough to register a business and start operating, then establishing an HSE management system is not rocket science, it's not complicated. It is all about one, commitment. Are you willing to walk the talk? Are you willing to invest time to develop people, to train people, to take care of HSE responsibilities of your organization in line with the business that you do? So we walk the companies through this. And I know some companies may have fears. Mine is a very small business, maybe a micro. I do not have the kind of money for a consultant or something like that. But our services are tailored to the scale of the business. If we look at a company like, let's say Total, maybe it has 1,000 procedures and work instructions. If you're operating a small catering company, 5 procedures could be enough for you. You don't need 1,000. And I think some people get frustrated when they go to look for a consultant to help them to put in place HSE management systems, and he dumps on them all these big procedures. Perhaps they were borrowed from a huge company, and they are put on them, and they feel they can't even breathe with them. So what we are doing is to tailor HSE management systems to the scale of operation, to the scale of requirement as per the various Ugandan companies. Yeah, that's what I can say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Justus. Ladies and gentlemen, our listeners and viewers, would like to bring the Q&A session to a close. We promised we would close this webinar at 12:30. We are just a few minutes away to 12:30. But I would like to thank our panelists and speakers so much for the informative information that we've received from them this morning. I would like to thank Total for sponsoring this together with Talo and the Chamber of Mines. It's been useful in my view. And I would like to implore Ugandans to keep engaging and tap into the opportunities that are ahead of us. The risks will be there, but let's not fear the risks, because the opportunities are definitely bigger than the risks. Thank you very much. Rosette?
Thank you so much, Pamela. I think it's been a very exciting, a very engaging webinar. Besides time, we could have gone all day because we see a lot of feedback, a lot of questions that are relevant to the conversation coming in from the public. So as we conclude, I want to thank you all for participating in the webinar. I want to thank our moderator. Pamela has done a very good job. She's taken us through the discussion very smoothly and coherently. Thank you, our panelists, for sharing your knowledge and experience. And as well, I must thank the administrative team on the back end, as well as the technical team that's enabling this live stream. As we conclude, I would like to advise the local suppliers out there that in order for them to understand the immensity of the opportunities which are upcoming, they need to look into the results that came from an industrial baseline survey that was done in preparation for the projects. This information is public. It's available online on the PAU website, as well as different platforms. If you need any details for the link, please reach out to us and we will be able to share it with you. We also will be sharing a short survey with you at the end of this day, and we implore you to give us some feedback. This will help us to prepare for future engagements. We need to make sure that we're providing you relevant information and we're addressing your concerns and helping you to prepare. So I thank you all for participating. We look forward to further engagements, and please have a good day and stay safe.